Welcome to the Michael Page Technology Leadership Interview Series. Now, the purpose of this series is to take the key learns from leaders throughout 2020 and be able to share those with the wider community to help make better informed decision making as we head into 2022. Now, my name is James Barrett. I'm your host today, and I lead Michael Page's technology, digital and transformation business. And our guest today is Mike Potter. Mike has been a leader across the utilities, NHS and government, and will be sharing his insight with us today. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Now, Mike, clearly we've all been through a lot over the last 15 months. I think a good place to start is really to understand, where were you, what were you doing when the pandemic hit us?
Yeah, so thank you, James. Looking back over a year now, the time I was Chief Technology Officer for Thames Water, we were busy, start of a new financial 5-year planning cycle, so we were busy initiating a new transformation program at the time. All of that kind of stopped when the pandemic hit. We had to rethink, what do we need to do to respond to the pandemic? What do we need to accelerate that we hadn't previously planned? And what do we then need to accelerate from within the existing transformation? Priority one was re-enabling the business. So that was around the provision of thousands of devices and extending all of our software licensing so we could run our services remotely. We then had to implement a range of new services that we didn't have. So at that point, we were busy trying to replace our customer experience platform. So had no way of taking calls remotely. So in 2 weeks, we set up AWS Connect, and we were taking calls remotely. One of the challenges we had, like everybody else, though, we were a business with a mixed economy of devices. So we had 1,000 people working at home with like a desktop perched on the end of their kitchen table. We had to provision headsets, get these things installed and located for them. And one of the surprises to us was actually around our supply chain. What we hadn't realized was it wasn't just Thames we needed to support, it was some of our partners as well who needed similar help. And then beyond that, it was kind of respond well, keep the business working, and what do we need to do differently as a result of the pandemic? And as I say, that was our income fell, many of our supply and demand models stopped working because everything changed out there as customers moved out of London into the Thames Valley. Yeah. So we had to start a series of new programs of change, as well as we had to accelerate others, which would, help us with our financial position, help them with their operational performance in that new context. So, and that's what we focused on really for the last 9 or 12 months. And it's been an extraordinarily rewarding but challenging time, uniquely challenging time, I think, for all of us.
I think we everyone learned a lot, didn't they? I think that's the consistent from the inconsistent environment. And if you look at yourself as a leader, nothing can prepare you fully for the impact of such a major incident and ongoing kind of challenge. But what did you find out about your own kind of leadership style and approach? What would you take away from those certainly those early 3 to 6 months when really no one had an idea what was going on?
I think 2 things really. One is, at the end of the day, trying to create, an adaptive organization. So it isn't one that everything is based on set plans, but it's about the agility to respond as a business and as a set of individuals. And I think, what I learned is that I'd inculcated a lot of that into the team, that we needed to kind of flow to the work and flow to the problems and opportunities we had, be nimble in responding to them, be creative in solving the problems, but then using those as the basis of scaling to do things differently in the future. And I think I was lucky that I'd been in the role nearly a year when it happened, so I'd have an opportunity to start making some of those changes. And it just reinforced to me that actually in the future, the one thing you can do is build an enduring culture and capability that's able to adapt in that way into dynamic circumstances, but is also therefore always taking those almost crisis opportunities to build capability that will endure. So I think that was the first thing I learned as a team. The thing I learned personally was about the need for resilience through this, And at the time, the start of the pandemic, the first week of the pandemic, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. So on top of the circumstances of the pandemic, I also had personal challenges to deal with as well. And I learned all about the resilience you need to find within yourself. And for me, that was around starting to take more time for myself, even in the middle of a crisis, to get fit, to lose weight. So over that time, I've lost a substantial amount of weight. I'm fitter than I was. And I think that's set me up in good stead for the long term. But it's fundamentally reinforced that actually you need to always look after your well-being, but particularly at times of maximum stress, you also need to look after it. You particularly need to focus on that, and whatever way for you find your own personal resilience.
Wow, I was going to say that's obviously a very challenging time, and best wishes to your wife for a healthy return. And in terms of the team and going back to that start of that pandemic, clearly you've worked in lots of organisations where you've had to build in that level of adaptability, flexibility. If you're giving advice to someone who maybe is in a more of a legacy mindset organisation, they might have been caught out by the pace of the change and transformation, and they're starting from potentially a pretty low bar in regards to building in that agility. Where would you advise them to start? What's kind of phase one on that kind of maturity scale?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is, and I know it's a kind of well-known phrase, but never waste a crisis. It's a great opportunity to catalyze some change. You wouldn't want to do it in the way that we've had to with the pandemic, but it has. I think the second thing is you don't have to do this yourself. In standing up the things that we needed to keep the business running, we've drawn heavily on our supply chain and our partners. So we've utilized the skills and resources of people that we could access to do this. The third thing I would say is you're going to take some risk along the way. And some of those risks will come back to bite you. Things won't always work the way you intend. The key thing when you're doing that is actually to ensure that you just capture the justification, the rationale, because they then become the basis for learning in the future. But also, I think it's important to know why you made the decisions you made, because they are made with imperfect information at the time. The other thing is, of course, you're asking people to do an awful lot. And in the most extreme of times, it wasn't just my well-being that was the focus. It was the whole team, as well as the individuals in our organization who are directly serving our customers. A huge focus put in through that period on looking after the individuals, because they were doing amazing things, working crazy hours, solving incredibly difficult problems to get things done. And actually, a lot of focus put into making sure, checking in regularly, all kinds of ways to make sure that people were still looking after their own well-being and that people stayed healthy throughout this period. So I think if you find yourself in this scenario again, I think, you can do it. There are people who can help. One of the other mindful choices we made was to move forward, to break our existing technology kind of paradigms and move forward with modern cloud-based services and stick resolutely just to configuring simple things out of the box. Turns out you can still run a business with minimum viable products. And that's the whole point of calling them minimum products, viable products, is actually they can allow you to do things. So you've got to give up on some of the complexity and sophistication and just accept the limits of what you can do. But actually, powerful new cloud technologies enable you to build and deliver services at a level incredibly quickly. And we just cut straight through that. The one thing we didn't do was negotiate or procure any of this. And that was one of the conscious choices we took. And of course, you then realize you've locked yourself into something that's growing and people are enjoying, but you've then got to come back to the commercials. But the great thing was, all of the partners we chose, like Amazon, Microsoft, and Salesforce, were fantastic in not taking advantage of that, recognizing the unusual circumstances. And we had that conversation with them up front, find alignment of values with people. So yeah, there's a lot you can do, remarkably, and you don't need to be as well funded or resourced as most organizations are to be able to achieve these things.
Yeah. No, I think setting the expectations on the partners from a start is probably a very sensible option. I had a wry smile as you were talking in terms of let's just get it out the cloud box and get it moving. I think the challenge historically has always been the business that wants to bespoke and change everything. So I was just interested as to whether you found that the business was more, or stakeholders generally have been more comfortable sticking with a as is minimal viable product, and therefore their desire to change everything is probably scaled back as there's been other kind of priorities. Or equally, if you had to firefight a lot of demands because people have been under pressure to try and get their part of the business working more effectively.
I think the first thing is one of the things we learned is we got there through co-creation. So it wasn't just the technology team. There were lots of users and suppliers, and it was a collaborative exercise. And we actually banned the phrase "the business" as part of that,
Okay.
so we could actually start to kind of we're working as one team to solve this problem. We're playing different roles in this. And it was a really powerful example of collaborative working on an equal footing. And I think that was important, and that set the stall. Second thing is, there's an awful lot of progress and benefits to be had simply by using these capabilities out of the box as they are. So sticking to it had the advantage of giving us pace. Also meant we didn't create an enormous amount of tech debt, which we later have to retire. But it set the tone for future work. So in the last 9 months, we've delivered a complete new backbone for the Thames business post-pandemic, in the middle of a pandemic, from customer management through to planning and scheduling of field forces to field force mobile apps, with 80 integrations to other systems that's been built and deployed for 700 users in our waste business in 9 months. Key to that was we took and bottled what we did in the pandemic response, which was the close collaborative working, sticking to cloud platforms, using tools out of the box as they, building capabilities up, configuring capability, if you like, rather than customizing it. We took all of those things and the responsiveness that we created, and we started to translate it through to the way we worked on our existing programs. And of course, part of the rationale for doing that was to accelerate the delivery of those, because they help our business performance and they help our customers, which is something we needed to do given the negative impact the pandemic's had on our business performance. So we saw actually quite strongly just to bottle those things, make them the boundaries of how we would work in the future. And so far, certainly over the last 9-12 months as we've done that, we put 5 major new platforms live in this business as a consequence.
Oh, wow.
Salesforce, we fully implemented the Connect voice capability. We put ServiceNow in to support all of our HR and people functions, and we built 2 exciting analytics platforms that we call Smart Waste and Smart Water. Now, we're not fully exploiting those, but we built those capabilities so quickly because we bottled everything that we did in the pandemic and turned it to the way we do things. And we're still learning and improving how to build fast, how to ensure that we can provide the product leadership that's needed, how to re-engineer our decision processes and accountabilities and all the other things that it's tested to the limits. But I think the lessons we learned in the pandemic gave us the confidence to just continue to execute and deliver in the same way. And we've made remarkable progress over the last 9 months as a consequence.
That's really interesting, because I think what I'm taking from that is if you learn the principles from delivering at pace, in ambiguity, in that level of challenge, and maybe not fail fast, but certainly learn fast to put a positive spin on it and take it forward. Okay, good, thank you. And then in regards to skills that have kind of you've seen emerge, or actually you can see in the future, whether those are the softer skills in individuals, or equally more tech skills. What do you think is going to be the next evolution as we go into 2022 and beyond? What have you seen, if I frame it in a slightly different way, if I'm looking as a potential candidate to start investing in personally or technically for the future, what would your advice be as a technology leader?
I think for us, there's been a couple of areas that have come out of this. One is, like, we talk a lot about data. And the Smart Waste, Smart Water platforms that we created, incredibly proud of them, and we really start to see some quite extraordinary impacts of the value of bringing enormous data sets together, cleaning it up, and then applying smart tools like AI to them. What that's exposing for us, and I think in the economy more generally, is the fact that we're going to need data ops, data engineering, and data science skills in huge quantities in the future as we grow this. And what's interesting, I'm seeing a set of new emerging models in the industry now where people are building data universities, or similar things. They're taking people with aptitude and turning them very rapidly into people with the skill sets to work in these various data fields. I think data science is the one where it's going to take longer, because inherently there's a lot, I suspect there's more lead time more time to build those skills up. But certainly we're seeing both the huge growth in our need for them, but also emerging models out in the industry where people are building capability quickly and growing that capability to try and service and furnish that. So that's one area. Inherently, we're also seeing big growth in cyber. And the reason for that is our risk profile is changing. You can take an organization like Thames and say, because we've had so many fragmented platforms and many of them are so old, no one was writing malicious code for the systems that we've run up until this. But in moving to the cloud, the first thing you're doing is you're concatenating all of your risk. You're bringing all that together. So if your business, if the cloud goes down, cloud services go down, you're bringing much bigger parts of your business to its knees. So we need to, if we're increasing the attack surface that bad actors can have, then we need better skills to provide defenses, but also to be more responsive. Are we capable of spotting and intervening and responding quickly? Would that require scale analytics, very similar to the data problem we described before? But it also requires the ability for people to be able to practice and execute business continuity plans safely, as well as providing the hard defenses around us to try and mitigate it, as well as modeling and understanding human behavior and how bad actors might seek to influence that. It's a very different way. And that leads me to the third area, which is, as a business, we've traditionally sought to better serve our customers, actually starting to understand our customers, and then potentially thinking about how we can positively influence their behavior becomes the next great way, possibly built on the same analytics and data kind of basis. But one example of customer behavior is we've got an objective to reduce per capita consumption of water, which makes sense because water is getting increasingly scarce in the climate environment we're in. We want to help people to use this scarce resources as effectively as we can. How do we actually do that? Yeah, of course, we can smart meter. But what can we do with that data? Can we create a kind of Fitbit for water that helps maybe through a mobile app or whatever, where actually what we can use all these behavioral techniques like gamification, etc., that start to help and encourage people to use water more wisely. So, I think there's a huge amount of exciting work around behavioral insights and analytics that we can start to do. Understand why our customers behave the way they want and better serve them, but see where in some cases we can start to nudge and influence their behavior for the broader benefit of society. And I think we're unusual, and we're one of the few organizations that actually wants its customers to use less of its product. Which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, at the moment, I think you're in the minority there, aren't you? But
and I've been there before, obviously working in the National Blood Service. That was one of the objectives, which is the wise use of blood, the safe use of blood and safe blood transfusion practice also required us to do that. And then how do you operationally respond to a reducing income? Well, notwithstanding all kinds of demands on you. So, interesting environment to be in, but one that I think we need to get smarter at. How do we understand our customers, and how in some cases can we change their behavior? And I think behavioral science and insights are going to be key to that.
No, I think it's where we've seen the market going, isn't it? How do we use that data to make better informed decisions? How do we empower our customers to make better decisions, to make better use of our services? And it comes back to your approach with the suppliers. If you partner at the start and align your objectives, your chance of success and a less bumpy road to success is key.
Absolutely.
So talking of bumpy roads, so digital transformation, you and I have been speaking about it for years. I liked earlier you said you banned the term business, for co-creation. Should we be banning the digital in digital transformation now, or should we be banning the transformation?
Well, I think it's probably time.
Yeah.
Look, digital disruption is real. There's no bones, but it's just disruption. And if you see the charts where the share of retail online was going up 1% market share a year for the last 20 years, and then over the last year it's gone up 10%. And it's now bringing in retail disruptive business models like fast deliveries and things like that. A lot of hyper localization. Disruption's real in every sector, whether it's bits or bytes, whether it's big or small, right? Disruption's here. So whether you call it digital or not, we're all being disrupted. I don't think I ever envisaged, and I started as a chemical engineer. My first job was helping to build plants to replace CFCs. So I was involved in the environmental kind of debate, 30 years ago. Did I ever envisage that we would see the decarbonisation of the electricity supply, and with it, the loss, the potential loss of some of these big brand names in cars to be replaced by people you've never heard of, like Rivian and Polestar. So that disruption's real. First thing. Second thing is the transformation is not about the plans or programs you set. It's about the changing capability and culture that you create. Many years ago, I saw incredible guy from Shell, their strategy director, Ari de Gois, and he said the only sustainable competitive advantage is innovating more quickly than competition. So your transformation is not to get from A to B in terms of, well, we're shifting our business model or we're building a new set of products. Actually, your transformation is a one-time opportunity driven by disruption to create this sustainable competitive advantage, your culture and your capability in your business. So I think if you see this as a set of plans that get you a new set of products or a shift from product to services or an evolution of your business model, you're missing the bigger challenge. I think the danger with digital transformation is, well, if I just implement a load of enabling technology, will be great. And secondly, all I need is a plan and some milestones if I'm successful. It's not that. You're actually building this adaptive organization that uses its partners for innovation, not just for development, that is capable of reacting to influencing customer behavior, but also positively reacting to it. To trends in the market, to seeing the threats and disruptions and getting ahead of that curve, or to become a disruptor in its own right. And I think it's possible to do that. I think about some of the places I've worked, like HMRC, where the evolution of the introduction of making tax digital, something I was intimately involved in, was a shift in our business model, but it was based on the growing digital capability and the growing digital culture of delivering fast for customers, co-creating with users. It was based on that, and that's a culture that's endured subsequently to be able to do things like build furlough in 4 weeks. I mean, just incredibly powerful what the team's done. But it was because the investment that went on over the last 5 or 7 years in that organization is being about building a very different way of working, very much more intimate with customers, as the consequence of which able to respond very dramatically to their needs. That's what this is about. So if you see it as a transformation with a plan and a program, and it isn't about shifting your culture, then you're probably missing the point, because you're going to point and react to it. But it's not just digital. The disruption is technology enabled, but it's everything about what you do. The move to product to service, the move away from a business model where you do it, where others do it as part of a platform or ecosystem. I mean, these are the shifts. The shifts are not just plus 10 on your performance. It's 10x that you need to achieve, 10 times the performance levels you were at previously. So I would probably ban those terms, but I wouldn't waste the opportunity to take advantage of the current environment to affect some real change.
Yeah, be some change of some business cards along the way if we drop digital and transformation, wouldn't there? I'd have to think of a new business model. And you mentioned then, you mentioned earlier the NHS, and actually just more recently around HMRC, which was a huge kind of transformation agenda. I think you've got a really interesting kind of balance of experience where you've worked across commerce, you've worked across the public sector, and an interface between the two. And because of the way that the government is investing and looking for some great talent and also developing its own great talent, it'd be remiss of me not to ask you some questions around bridging that public sector and private sector divide, which historically has been there. I mean, so if we're thinking that the audience could potentially be some private sector leaders who have worked through private sector organizations, and now they really want to get into government and government service and be able to make a difference and give something back, what advice would you give to someone who's willing to take on that different kind of challenge? What's going to be the same? What's going to be different?
So on one level, I think the difference between public and private is overplayed. I've worked in both organizations. I've worked in big blue chip private companies. I've worked in small, medium, large-sized government organizations. Being blunt, a bureaucracy is still a bureaucracy, however it's organized and whatever it's. So large organization complexity, I think, is not unique to government. So the skills you need to be able to work within an organization that's entrenched in its current practice or business model or product set is the same wherever you go. I think that's the first thing. The thing that is different, and the thing that people coming from private to public underestimate, is how complex the stakeholder environment is. So whether it's ministers, senior civil servants, or the tens of thousands of influencing groups that seek to influence government policy and strategy and where and how money gets spent, the environment with stakeholders is unbelievably complex. The third point of difference, I think, as well, is although you do see this in big, perhaps global organizations especially, is a lot of what government needs to do to achieve its objectives requires organizations with quite different local objectives to join up. So if you think of government as, I want to register a birth, my circumstances have changed, I'm in employment, I'm not in employment, I'm in education, I'm in the workplace. In order to be accessing the services that government offers, those different life events or the different trigger points for you often requires multi-agency coordination and collaboration.
Right.
Working between multi-agency, you will have local objectives specific to them and global objectives that may span multiple government agencies is incredibly challenging. I did some work a few years back around trying to establish a future borders program for government, and recognize that although there are 4 or 5 principal actors at the border, there are over 30 government agencies with a stake for different reasons.
Right.
So achieving the multiple objectives for those actors requires you to have the ability to create powerful networks, between those organizations, so that you can actually affect collaboration, to be smart in how you use incentives, levers, influence, and other things to be able to achieve those shared objectives. And I think often when I worked in government, and see people coming in from the private sector and then finding it incredibly challenging to master and manage that landscape because it wasn't as straightforward as I think people often assume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting up to speed with that very complex stakeholder environment, basically.
Yeah, and recognizing that people have different objectives, and look, that exists in all companies. And I think if you worked in global organizations, you see a bit of that. The kind of, well, head office wants them, but we need.
Yeah.
That local versus global, how you split is often similar in big complex organizations. Every organization has it. It's just more so. It's orders of magnitude so, in my experience in government, between the two. But there are positives around the private sector. I mean, working in Thames as a private sector organization, our appetite for risk and our appetite for innovation is much greater.
Yeah.
You can invest in innovation knowing that not all of it will pay. It's really hard to do that in government. There is this willingness to invest, take risk, and to learn at the expense of the taxpayer. There's much more desire to have a clear, fixed set of outcomes that you're going to deliver. So there
judged against.
So there are differences between the two. They each have their very different strengths and each have their quite unique challenges. But there's a whole lot in the middle, 80% plus. Probably just the same in any big organization.
Yeah, might have slightly different language, different terms, but the root cause challenges and opportunities aren't dissimilar. And just with on the public sector side, in terms of developing talent within government organisations, retaining talents, as the government has been great at investing in various skills and development, has some fantastic individuals. We are seeing from a recruitment perspective a shift of those people leaving government potentially because there's going to be greater salary financial return. Any thoughts or pointers on how to retain a top level team and talent organisation?
I say this as somebody who's left government, but I didn't do it for the money. I think let's say, why do people work in government? I think that's probably the reason why. Then how do you accentuate those things? So in HMRC, I hired 700 people, I think it was, over a 1-year period to replace contractors and to build self-sufficiency and skill sets. That was right through to very senior experienced people, right through to a couple of hundred kind of apprentices and, so emerging talent through the business. And we focused on 3 things. It's a well-known model, but one was around purpose. Actually, what is it the government does that's unique to government or the third sector, which is having a social purpose? In the case of tax, it was paid for the things we all care about. In the blood service, it was, saving and improving lives. So really accentuating the purpose. Second thing was the opportunity to impact. So at HMRC, we did powerful storytelling, as much as we could do in every channel we could do, to talk about an organization that didn't just have a great purpose, it was also doing exciting work, create real possibilities for people to come and make a positive impact on society, so they could see how they could deliver benefit to society, not just be lost in a big machine. And the third part was really about their opportunity to develop. The one good thing about when you're a growing function and you're adding skills and you're taking on more responsibility and delivering more for your organization is you're growing. And within that growth, you can have the opportunity for people to develop themselves and progress and make more and more of an impact over time. So through our storytelling, which was partly about the success and the work we did, partly about giving a sense of the way we worked and the environment in which we operated. Give people a sense that they could develop, they could make a positive impact, and it was for something positive. And over that time, despite paying some of the worst wages in tech, definitely some of the worst wages in government, we hired, as I say, hundreds of people, and first time to fill was over 70%, which was around 10 times the ratio that some other departments were getting, because
that's really good. Yeah,
we were very clear about what the offer was to people. We also use things like our own people to provide an advocacy network, because it turns out everybody knows somebody. We're only 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon, aren't we? So we asked to provide positive advocacy.
Yeah.
But we're also creative on things like social media, using analytics to help us target people who might have a propensity to work in government because they had previously or worked in other sectors that were comparable. And I think if you think about why do people join, you then got to ask yourself, why would they stay? You've got to keep recreating those, keep reconnecting people with purpose. You've got to keep giving them incredible opportunities, and you've got to keep giving them the development growth that they seek. And one of my colleagues said, what you need to offer people is love, hope, and security. If you do that, then people want to work with you. And I think my experience is if you can offer those things, then you've got a really strong chance that people are going to stay with you. If you don't, you should just be incredibly proud of the fact that people have grown to the point where they can go and make a positive difference somewhere else. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then the final piece is, but that's why you then have your emerging talent programs, because you've got to factor in the fact that people will move on. Therefore, having apprentices, graduates, interns gives you a chance to sustain your own skill base, but also massive impact in terms of inclusion. And the work that I'm doing today with Thames is how do we step up our inclusion? And that's about giving people clear development pathways within the organization, but it's also about reaching out to groups who might not necessarily think they want to work for somebody like Thames or in a technology role, and getting them onto the intern, apprentice, and graduate schemes, so that actually we create a talent base for the future, but also one that much more accurately reflects the community we serve. So it's also, if you do that, it's also an opportunity to address your diversity and inclusion as well, as an organisation which is healthy for the organisation in the round as well. So.
No, 100% agree. I think that advocacy point is key, isn't it? At all levels of the organisation, inside and out. And we're going to keep hearing about digital skills gaps, indefinitely, because ultimately technology is going to keep moving forward. But what we don't hear enough about is what people are doing about it. And lots of organisations are doing great things, and lots of partners and government as well. So
absolutely.
Good. Well, look, thank you for sharing all of that, Mike. I think banning the business is definitely something that I'm going to take away, and it's official. You heard it here. Digital transformation is dead. Long live digital transformation, or whatever we're going to call it next. One question I do have for you, final question I like to ask all the guests. If there's one question you'd like to throw out there to a future guest or to the leadership community, what would it be?
Oh my goodness.
Put you on the spot.
One question I would ask of anybody else. I think the biggest challenge that society faces is joined up government, because I think the goals that government is seeking to achieve is so complex going forward and so challenging. You think about environment and climate crisis and water scarcity. You think about the erosion of the tax base, which digital has accelerated. You think about the growing need of people in our society as we re-equip for this new information age, as we address the legacy of pandemics and historical underinvestment. You've got to create a government and an ecosystem around government that works for society, creates and builds sustainable communities, gives people the support they need. How do you do that? How do you make all of that sustainable? So my question to anyone would be, how do we make government join up with all of the other actors as well, business and community and charities and others, in order to be able to solve some of those profound challenges that society faces in the next 20 or 30 years?
Excellent. That's a nice, easy question for the next person. Luckily, we've got Boris Johnson in a week's time. I'll speak to his people now. Thank you, Mike. That's been fantastic as ever. Thank you for sharing. And that hopefully that will benefit our wider leadership community. I think a problem shared is a problem halved at least, isn't it? So thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
If you found this video helpful for your recruitment journey, why not subscribe to our channel? And don't forget to tap the bell to get the latest videos first.